Previously, in Chapter 2 of My Name Is Sheba. Colette could feel the tension leave her shoulders as they hugged. She relaxed in his arms. They were the words she so needed to hear. Colette felt like she still needed to say it though. Burg, I need you to be here, to be present with me, with us. I know, baby, I know. I'm here now, he said. They looked silently into each other's eyes for a long period of time. Okay, come on, we got a show to do. From Subplay Creative, I'm Monroe Jones, and this is My Name Is Sheba, the coming-of-age saga of iconic jazz R&B artist Sheba Hawkins' rise from obscurity as an orphan to superstardom and the music she created along the way. My Name Is Sheba is written around the original music from the album of the same name by singer-songwriter Kandace Springs. Check out My Name Is Sheba, the album, at Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen. Chapter 3. As only those who live in New York can attest, the signs of spring are quite evident. They bathe Manhattan in a hopeful, if edgy, expectation which permeates the overall tone and energy of the whole city. The air feels lighter, tree-lined streets, once the monotone gray of cement and faded asphalt, take on various shades of green, accented with splashes of color from freshly planted window boxes, and all filtered with slits of blue sky, puffy clouds, and golden sunlight. In this environment, if only for a season, pedestrians have a hard time maintaining their pissed-off face. Burg and Colette, still stuck under the weight of their current circumstances, hadn't noticed. It'd been a hard winter, and to top it off, Burg just missed passing the bar. It would now be another 6 months before he could retake the exam. The burdens they now carried, secrets held, struggles to make ends meet, to keep their dreams alive, unresolved issues, were having a cumulative effect. It's true, they were one in their all-inness, greater than the sum of their parts. But this new entity they were committed to was so self-absorbed. The cloud they were under felt relentless. They couldn't see beyond their personal sphere of adversity. They needed to assuage their fears, real and imagined, and take some tangible steps or they would suffocate. Who can we go to, they wondered. As they separately mulled over the question, one person simultaneously came to mind. Colette's mom, Jewel. Mom called last week, offered Cole, cautiously testing the waters. Oh yeah, said Burg, not letting on he'd already thought of her. She wants us to come see her. Burg, you know she loves you. She's always been in your corner. What if, Burg broke in, you're right, I think we should go. They called Jewel and made arrangements for the following week. If they could spend a few days in Louisville, she'd feed them and they could use that money on bus fare. Searching for any sliver of hope they could cling to, their dark mood brightened, and briefly, as though through a small window at the end of a long dark hallway, they noticed spring. On Tuesday the following week, one of the remaining cold, wet gray days which winter in a last gasp stubbornly threw their way, they took the subway to the bus station. Between circumstances, the weather, the looming confrontation with Jewel, and the all-consuming hopelessness of the inside of the bus station, their distress was almost unbearable. Neither spoke in an attempt to just keep moving forward. Once settled on the bus towards the back and waiting to pull away, Colette took in the idling lull of the diesel engine and the low murmur of passengers getting settled. Unlike those on a flight with coffeed-up travelers pursuing hopeful opportunity, here it felt as though everyone on the bus was carrying a heaviness. All were, like them, trying to escape some insurmountable problem. And in those surroundings, in the midst of her observation, A strange, comforting repose came over Colette. For the next 19 hours, no one could reach them. They were briefly protected in their slow-moving metal cocoon, forced to pause. Suspended in time and space, they held hands, stared out the window, and watched the world go by. By Liberty Corner, an hour outside Manhattan, Burg and Colette were taking in cloudy skies and rural farmland. And the world, filtered through the tinted Greyhound windows, suddenly looked serene. They'd learned how to comfort one another without filling every gap with conversation. But amid the panic and laden plotting, they'd both underestimated the need for stillness of mind. Burg and Cole had their own language, a nonverbal way of relating. A muse-like dialect with an accent that only they shared. It was one of the magical attributes that just materialized through the music that night at Arturo's, stunning both of them and the audience. At first elusive, they'd learned to cultivate it and summon it at will, not only on stage, but in heart-to-hearts with one another. Burg had a name for those talks. He'd look at Colette and say, "Dance with me." They'd not really danced in a while. By Hagerstown, Maryland, they'd found their cadence. Colette, now relaxing, allowing herself to dream, asked, "Where do you think we'll be in 30 years?" Burg turned from the window and looked at her with wide eyes. 30 years? He smiled slightly. "Old and gray, I suppose." "No, I know. We'll be watching our kid on stage at the Grammys for the 3rd time." "Burg Hawkins, don't you put that on our baby," she said. Okay, no pressure. But if our kid has the disease." Sobered by the last comment, they both looked out the window and quietly pondered Burg's statement. "How do you think my mom's gonna take it?" asked Colette. Jewel's cool. She gets it. I'm a little nervous, but I have no doubt we're doing the thing we need to do. Baby, I'm ready to tell somebody." It was late March, but as the bus headed south, the sky cleared, the fields turned green, and by sunset, it felt like April. They'd been on the road since 6 a.m., but wouldn't arrive until 1 in the morning. No complaints from Burg, though. Part of him wished the trip could have been even longer. For the first time in months, they felt the urgent, the pressing, give way to quiet, pondering hopefulness. Hopefulness about each other, about the baby and the future, the promise of possibility. Through the window, the sinking sun painted the sky with hues of orange, red, and pink. They were held captive by the scenery, afraid that looking away might scare the moment, causing it to flee. Colette remembered the lyrics to an old Simon and Garfunkel song her mom taught her when she was little. And the moon rose over an open field. "I wish we could stay here forever," she said, almost to herself, under her breath. "What if we could capture it and take it with us?" Burg said quietly. Lost in thought, she didn't respond at first. Then, puzzled, Colette turned toward Burg. He took her hand, turned it over, and placed in it a small, worn, dark blue velvet box. The act was impulsive, but not the decision. He'd known shortly after they met. The ring, an amethyst, Cole's birthstone, was found at the pawn shop around the corner. He'd been carrying it in his backpack for weeks. The morning after that night at Dizzy's, Burg went down and traded his dad's sax for it. It was the cheapest ring that looked legit, like it had a story. It called out to him. And it was all Burg could afford. He had given thought to how he'd ask, and he knew the proper way would be to go to Jewel first. But Burg was overtaken by emotion. They were fully present, right now, in the moment that they shared. It was their story. It belonged to them. As the sun melted, Colette, smiling, nodded yes through the tears. The two of them would always look back on this season and remember the bus trip to Louisville as a respite, a life marker. They made a stop for dinner near Columbus, Ohio. Under any other circumstances, the tiny, tired roadside diner, which appeared to have been frozen in time, would have been passed over for a McDonald's, seen as too depressing. But to Burg and Colette, the Blue Moon Diner, complete with neon sign and a flickering letter N, felt as romantic as any roadside deli on Route 66 that might have existed in Nat King Cole's day. In years to come, they'd return more than once. By 10 p.m., after covering their hopes, dreams, and fears, they drifted off, lulled into a heavy sleep by the darkness and the hum of the diesel engine. 30 minutes outside of Louisville, they awoke to the driver's voice.
We're about a half hour from our final destination, Louisville, Kentucky. Please make sure you grab all your belongings, and remember, you can go Greyhound and leave the driving to us.
Jewel was easy to spot through the window. She looked like she could be Cole's older sister. And at 1 a.m, there were few people inside the well-lit but almost empty Louisville bus station. Burg and Colette stepped off, stood in the dark by the bay outside, and felt a sudden rush of adrenaline in the cold night air as the attendant unloaded their bags. They walked slowly, anxiously, shoulder to shoulder, until they reached the door of the lobby. Then Colette slowed, lagging slightly behind Burg and the bags. Jewel saw them and her face brightened. She ran to meet them, reaching Burg first, giving him a long, tight hug. Then, as Colette stepped out from behind Burg, Jewel, smiling into Cole's eyes, moved in for the hug. Then, pulled back slightly, looked down, and gasped. As she slowly brought her eyes back up to meet Cole's, they froze for what felt to Burg like a lifetime. Jewel, then lowering her face into her hands, burst into tears. Colette and Burg looked at each other, shifting into damage control mode. Then Jewel, raising her head, opening her arms, mouthed, "I'm so happy." Taking them both in, the three of them stood, embracing and sobbing uncontrollably. Jewel because of her joy and happiness, and Burg and Colette because of their relief at no longer having to carry the secret or shoulder their burdens alone. And in the comfort of Jewel's arms, they finally let it all out. Late Wednesday morning in Louisville, Kentucky, Burg awoke, disoriented, finding himself in the bedroom of a teenage girl from the early 80s, with Michael Jackson, Bowie, and Culture Club peering down at him. As he came to, he made out the echoey voices coming from downstairs. He lay there wondering how long it had been since he heard Cole laugh. Throwing on jeans and a t-shirt, he headed down. The hallway, the stairs, the foyer, all felt as though they'd been frozen in time by some event that prevented life from moving forward. Burg entered the kitchen to the smell of bacon and coffee. Jewel and Colette had been up for hours, reconnecting and working through neglected mother-daughter business and reestablishing the intimacy they'd known for those years when it was just the two of them. Jewel knew, in that way that only a mother can, that her daughter would land on her feet. She also sensed, again, through a mother's intuition, a good, worthy heart in Burg Hawkins. She knew they'd be together from the first time she met him. "So, Burg Hawkins comes into my house, steals my daughter, and sleeps in, does he?" stated Jewel with a playful spark. Burg wiped his eyes with a sheepish grin. "We got rules if you're going to be in this family. Come give me a hug." Burg's eyes watered up. He was still in an emotional state from the greeting in the bus station. After a long, lazy breakfast and heartfelt conversation, there was a lull. Burg saw a slight grin from Jewel and Cole, a shared thought between the two of them that told him he wasn't in on the joke. What?" smiled Burg, wryly. "Mama and I've been thinking. We got an idea," said Colette. "What if we got married? Today?" Burg, expressionless, turned to Jewel as if looking to the adult in the room for sanity, for support. She just grabbed Cole's hand and nodded up and down excitedly, like a giddy high school girlfriend. Burg, still expressionless, glancing back to Colette without moving his head, said, "I love it." Burg and Colette knew that nothing about their relationship was status quo. They'd known they'd wanted to take this step, so why not now? Like this, with the mother of the bride's blessing. The two had been so consumed with problem solving and survival that they'd not spent much time on planning or details. After growing up in the rigidity of the Hawkins family, that suited Burg just fine. Some traditions in the South die hard, and for many raised in that environment, unspoken rules become burdens carried, which, over time, lead to regret for a life unlived. Burg and Cole unapologetically embraced their story. Burg also knew, however, that there'd be consequences for his actions. A face-off was coming. But today, on this occasion, nothing else mattered. Every thought or care not lending itself to this cherished event would be cast aside until some necessary time in the future. Early that afternoon, the three got ready and hopped into Jewel's 1978 Volvo station wagon, bound for the Louisville courthouse. Just as they were pulling out of the driveway, Burg yelled, "Wait!" He'd spotted an early bloom on the magnolia tree in the front yard. Jumping out, he ran over and broke off a small branch with a pink and white flower attached to 3 big green leaves. And it's that makeshift bouquet which Cole holds in the Polaroid taken by Jewel during that ceremony. Cole's mom relished the thought of being so important and wearing so many hats. Photographer, witness, maid of honor, chauffeur. If there were anyone forever in Burg and Colette's corner, they knew it was Jewel. With vows stated and licensed purchased, Burg and Colette became Mr. and Mrs. James Burgundy Hawkins. And in the midst of uncertainty and a hard season, that Wednesday, March 28, 1990, was filled with hope and promise. Jewel then treated them to an early dinner at Jack Fry's, a storied Louisville restaurant she and Charles frequented in the early 70s. They were squeezed in without a reservation for a 4:45 table. That night, the three of them laughed, told stories, and recounted the events of the last 24 hours that would, from then on, be spoken of as the perfect day. Coming up in Chapter 4 of My Name Is Sheba. I'm okay, everything's fine, but I need to tell you this. "I'm listening," said the voice on the other end, bracing. "Colette and I are gonna have a baby." Deafening silence from Burg's dad. He could hear his mom in the room, concerned. "What is it? What's happened?" "Burg got his girlfriend pregnant," uttered James in a low voice, staring off into space. That tone, that phrasing. Burg was instantly filled with all the familiar demons of childhood. He feared where the conversation would go. This chapter of My Name Is Sheba was written, recorded, and produced by me, Monroe Jones. The series is based on music from the album My Name Is Sheba by Kandace Springs and can be found at Spotify, Apple, or wherever you stream music. Other original music in this episode is by Jason Donnelly, Humans Win, Enzo Orifice, and Tincture Music, all of whom have royalty-free music available at Storyblocks. That's storyblocks.com. The lyric quote comes from the song America, written by Paul Simon. For more behind-the-scenes info on the creators of the story and the music, visit mynamessheba.com. Finally, if you like what you're hearing, please follow and leave a rating and tell a friend. My Name is Sheba is a product of Subplay Creative.